Rumblers doesn't play like anybody else. They just are on the hunt in the early game. They don't care about placements, but here we go. We've got 2 rounds left as we make our way over towards Miramar. The plane is up and in the air. Pretty easy plane path right through the center of the map, coming up from the north, down towards the south.
Here we go, the last 2 games of the day. It is time to get aggressive. This map requires a lot of sniping ability, knowing the map, and where to position yourself, knowing the terrain, where there are divots that you can hide in and various other things.
But my eyes are on Hacienda. We saw it get a little bit spicy last week, and we know that there are several teams that like to fight for control over Hacienda right now, and you can see they're all floating above it, trying to eye out who's actually going to make the push down for it. It looks like it might be Lazarus that has the inside track, as now 4AM's going to take up towards the north. Gen G is going to push off to the east. All
right, this was a really fun match we had in Hacienda on the very last day of the semifinals, so it looks like for now we will not get a repeat of that. Maybe a little bit sad for you and me, Matrim, but for the teams, it's it's the finals, so you can't be risking those kind of situations.
Wait until you need to go for that fight. Right now, you don't need to quite yet. So you can see Ace doing a stretch back down towards the south. Going to be moving around Los Leones. There's a couple of teams that are going to be up north of them, but nothing too hazardous. We talk about the size of Los Leones very regularly. Plenty of space to work with. Really, it's going to be hunting down vehicles. W-Click's going to get control over Los Leones itself. Circle is going to pop. It is back up towards the northwest.
All right, this is pretty interesting. Gen G has got it booted out of a bunch of their loot spots that they really like normally. They're a Monte Nuevo. They went up to El Pozo during the semis. Now they're over to El Azahar because of the situations they're running into. I find that really interesting that Gen G hasn't been able to really find a home on this map.
Not a lot of people made the push over towards El Pozo, so that is open. We've got the crater that's just north of that. And then Navi, who has this huge section of the map that's carved out for them, they really can control about a quarter of the circle right now if they do choose to. It's not always for the best if they do opt into doing that, but there's just nobody around them right now.
QM in a nice spot as well. They have their pick of the litter where they want to set up, maybe try to put some traps in place on those roads that kind of run north to south in the eastern part of this circle. 4AM is up in there. A lot of teams are actually already up in that area, about half, so not many teams are going to have to make a huge rotation. I really find it interesting what Tempo Storm is doing here. You've got Zampa that went way to the south. The rest are in Impala, probably for vehicles and just loot separation.
Looks like a little bit of safety play coming in there, making sure that nobody was going to hot drop any locations. We do see that every once in a while in these starting rounds, but right now it just feels like it's all going to be about rotations and how people make do in this initial rotation, because we do have a lot of teams that are playing back over towards the east, Navi, with all that control up towards the north, and then we've got all these teams that are back down towards the south that are not inside the safe zone, and they're going to have to figure out what is their clear path to move in. El Pozo is the easiest path to make it in, but if you opt into playing over towards the east, it's going to be a lot of teams over there very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a couple teams for sure that are going to think about that road on the western part of the map that runs along the backside of El Pozo. That's usually vacant. Will someone decide to set up a trap or something like that? It's going to be a little more difficult because you're not getting as many scrims in before this, so you don't know the team's tendencies quite as well because a few teams are changing up loot locations and various other things.
So we do have BC that's already on the move. No surprise whenever you're looking at a circle like this, a lot of these teams are going to opt very early rotations. You just land, loot, get control over a vehicle, start making your way in, do a little bit of scouting, or you can just kind of run as an armada toward a building complex. Whenever you have a circle like this, you have to be very cautious as there's a lot of hills that are going to block sight lines, make it very difficult. A couple of people probably going to be taking pot shots back down at rotating teams and forcing awkward rotations.
Yeah, like the central part of this circle is actually very hilly, has quite a bit of variation in the terrain that you can utilize. If it goes south towards El Pozo, it gets a little flatter once you start getting towards the city itself. If it moves up north, that's going to be really interesting. We don't get to see many circles that go way north, like north of La Cobreria.
No, that's kind of rare. We don't ever see anything around Oasis, anything like that. Every once in a while, we'll dance around that location. I'm kind of curious if we've ever even seen anything around Trailer Park. I don't even think we've gone that far northwest ever in anything that I've seen. But maybe we might be up for something a little bit more spicy inside. This feels like we've gotten a lot of our crazier circles out in the earlier parts of the day.
Yeah, you can see this is Entis Ace. The winners from the last game are making their way out of the southern part of Los Leones, heading up kind of towards the Chumacera area right now. The Rumblers were in Chumacera. They're heading in as well. FaZe is opting to take that very west road that I was talking about earlier. So the Rumblers might once again bump into FaZe. It just feels like, for whatever reason, these two teams have very similar ideas on how to move in the early game.
FaZe likes to do very long rotations, come in, no specific rush really, but then you see That's kind of the way the Rumblers like to play. They like to sneak up back behind people and then just jump out. We got Forrest that's taking a couple of shots on a rotating W click there. Silzen should be able to make it away. Just going to get a little bit scared, make it back behind those hills. Should be fine.
Yeah, it looks like Kale isn't really able to connect with much onto the members of W-Click. Harold coming down, and then Kale still there, still putting some pot shots, but there's enough of a hill here that W-Click can utilize to keep themselves outside of Kale's line of sight.
Also feeding information back over about how much damage you took whenever you make one of those pushes. Like, hey, there's only one person there, so we can continue the rotation. Just be very careful off on this angle, and you can see as well the rest of the teams to make their way through. And I love this. Being able to see how people rotate and how they actually loot in these earlier stages. Look at how all of these teams make sure to keep distance from each other. They have certain buildings that they like to drop to. Everybody cleans up every building around it, regroups, and then the rotation kicks off. Yeah,
this is a really neat, interesting angle we get there. Doya's going to let some members of W-Click pass. Maybe he's going to take some shots at Rival. Yes, he does. He's able to get one headshot. Is not able to get another one to land.
Doya had to be so cautious with that. Sometimes you can just take a tire to the face. Doya's trying to follow up on it, but it looks like Ribbo's going to be able to break sightline back down next to that road, so the hill's going to protect him. Rest of the teammates going to come through, and we got W-Click caught up in rotation. Yeah, don't go over towards the loop, man. I know you want to. Everybody is tempted. Just keep on going.
It seems like W-Click hasn't been able to find their footing so far today, Matt. We saw them do very well with their positioning and other things in the semis, giving themselves an easy route here to the finals. I kind of want to see this team pick it up, especially for our Lat AM fans out there. We want to see W-Click pop off and get some excellent moments for us.
So we see a lot of the teams opting into a do center strategy, just trying to make sure that they get that position so that way mathematically they don't have to make these later rotations, hoping the fact that numbers are just going to favor them in this. But speaking of numbers and rotations here, you can see it's going to be T1 running right back over here next to Domu. Down inside that dip, he should be able to block that out. That shouldn't be too hazardous, but VC Gaming was looking like they wanted to push up into that complex, and instead, aggression coming up from T1 is just going to go ahead and give them the spot.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what VC wants to do off of this. Domu was able to get down in there, probably unnoticed by T1, but it looks like for now, they're not really interested in a fight. They've got GEX over on the right there as well, so this is definitely a situation that VC definitely not thinking is going to be good for them.
You can see the average points off on the left side of the screen. That's very, very important as we look into Miramar. These last two games could be a very big proportion point for a lot of these teams to really make their way up the leaderboards. We've seen Forrest be very active, but got to be careful as GX Kane's going to jump back behind that with one life, narrowly survive.
Yeah, H-Win was almost to put Kane down there, just shy of it with that one hit point. He's able to get his first aid off. Nerf is going to find a Murado for himself, potentially. He's just going to take some painkillers first and then maybe get in a vehicle as the circle is closing and teams are getting to ready to make their phase 2 rotations.
Right, so it's all about positioning coming up through here. Even these little side shots that these guys are taking back and forth each other, it's all about information control. As you can see Harold looking back over towards T1. VC looks like they've already rotated away from that dip that was down over here we were talking about a second ago. But Ribbo does go down by getting run over by Silzen, and that's not good this close to another team, as shots are going to come through from T1 and take down Harold.
That is 2 knocks for W-Click right now. Let's see if T1 wants to push on this. It looks like they are going to get a little bit aggressive, see if they can maybe capitalize on this. But DJ Boy's putting some nice shots. He gets the knock onto Helen. That's a bit of a disaster for T1.
That's going to stop T1 in the tracks off of that one angle, but looks like they're pushing around the side of this. They still want to make their push back over towards W-Click. Going to go for that spray back over towards at least get 1 point. Goes for the peek around the other side. Nice shots back on this, so Adder's just going to retreat. Very happy with the amount of damage they got off.
Yeah, Ragnar very hurt, but he is able to back off as well. So both teams trading a little bit of damage there. T1 loses a member to VC, but they are able to pick up a point for themselves. Now you've got Lazarus moving towards 4 AM. And it is way less there. Let's see what exactly 4 AM wants to do on this. Typically, Matchroom, we've seen them be aggressive on these situations.
They really like to take control over buildings. 4 AM likes to separate out, get a lot of information, but they don't want to overcommit. Whenever they see somebody else approach on them, they want to try to separate away from this. But this is the exact points that Lazarus wants to get. They know these rotation points. They're taking the shots at everybody up on the top of the hill, but nice defense coming out from 4 AM, making sure to provide the cover fire that was necessary so their guy could get away.
All right, nice move there by Wayless to get out. Lazarus now controls that compound. Pretty fairly central for them. And ooh, careful, Nerf. You've got Gustav up there with an M4.
That was a little bit of peekaboo there. Just take a couple of shots. It's like, okay, I didn't kill you. Hop on the motorcycle. You can have the high ground now. That's going to be Ribbo getting spotted out by 4 a.m. And it's just so much trouble coming out from W-Click. They can't find anywhere safe to stay at.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say no matter where they go, there's somebody already set up there. There just isn't a lot of real estate available in the center of this circle. 4 a.m. backs off into a small shacky compound for themselves. You can see Forever's got a destroyed vehicle to hide from there, and Lazarus has actually pushed up a bit and is putting the pressure onto 4 a.m.
Just continuing the hunt, trying to figure out how they're going to rotate, seeing if maybe they can find any vulnerables, any weaknesses that can try to exploit at this point. A couple of shots going to go back over towards Forever. He's trying to make it back towards cover and narrowly does so. Purdy taking the shots at this high ground position.
Yeah, Purdy just not able to connect those last couple of shots with his SLR, getting about half damage onto the member of 4 a.m. and now he's going to back off, rethink the strategy. A lot of times when you take these shots, you're going to move up, shoot, back off. You want to reposition. You don't want the enemy to know where you're at because that's an easy recipe to get knocked.
So here we go. You can see a lot of these teams already going for their last-ditch rotations. Shots coming through on everybody that's already got strong positions inside the circle. Navi's running a very nice split up towards the north. A lot of control, really punishing Gen G. We are going to see FaZe rotate around a similar point to this, and it feels like Navi is still holding that strong northern control that we saw very early in this game and just making nice, subtle rotations to keep sightlines on each other, but still controlling about a good 500-600 meter area right now.
The shots from this battle definitely forced FaZe off, so they're
no.
going to be able to find potentially a different angle in, and Senya continuing to put some damage into Gen G. Taman's going to have to abandon that Murado, but so far, Senya not able to land much damage with that SKS.
But even not getting the damage out forced him to abandon the vehicle, and that's going to be more utility that's lost for late game. Whenever we see these guys rotating through this very hilly terrain, a vehicle for another circle might be a make or break point for one of these teams.
All right, FaZe has found a successful entry into the circle by the water treatment plant. Now, they've got Tempo Storm up ahead of them. Past that will be Lazarus, depending on how they want to rotate. What's actually interesting, and they might not be too sure about this, there's actually quite a bit of room on the eastern side of this circle by Hacienda.
And here we see a lot of North American teams really like to play towards the edge. Find out a couple of shots, get some kills onto it, and that's going to be Low sliding back over towards H-Win. Dropped and instantly flushed, as now everybody from Genesis is looking back this direction. That's why we so often see North America fight North America. They love to pick up points right on the edge of the circle, and that means that these teams regularly fight each other.
Yeah, the Rumblers, I talked to them backstage. They love fighting on the edge. It is their bread and butter. It is how they get their points, and we've seen that time and again throughout this tournament, and they've been able to make it pretty successful by doing that.
Rumblers do not care about placement points. They just want to kill as many people as possible early game, survive through, and if they get placement points, cool off of it. I mean, we've seen them repeatedly get this. Shift goes back up towards the north. Not a lot of teams really still going to have to rotate. It's just the guys back down towards the south. Going to have to figure out some way to separate through. A lot of terrain really being taken up right now. I feel like really just a little bit of San Martin and maybe Hacienda might be a couple of places you could go. There's a couple of dips, but they're very hazardous to move into right now.
I really like Lazarus's current position if they can keep Navi off their backs. They have a lot of vision control up on that hill here, but here is Indigo. He has the same idea. He thinks this is a pretty nice spot. Let's see if I can get up here with my motorcycle. He backs immediately off because Luke 12 has gotten in a vehicle of his own, and some shots come through. So Indigo going to wrap around, think about trying to go through a different angle, and might just settle for this little power grid here.
He's found himself in a kind of interesting spot where he managed to sneak up between about 3 teams, goes, all right, that might be a little bit too much, so it's retreat back off this. GEX taking the shots back over towards Iroh, catching him in rotation. That's going to be an easy down and flush. Not a lot of support cable coming in from the other TSM members as they are across the street right now. We do have one that's in a high ground spot, but a couple of shots now coming back over towards QM from Na'Vi.
All right, Wu Fang gets down in the hill. He is going to bandage himself up. Entis Ace making their rotation in between the members of QM. QM with a 2-2 split here, but somehow Entis Ace has kind of found a way to sneak through them just a little bit. Gen G is coming in very, very late. They were tanking a lot of blue damage. That's why Esther is so hurt.
Now see how the rotations were coming through. Rumbler's been bouncing around different sections of the map. FaZe also making that rotation way around the north. We see that to be very common with FaZe. That's like how they like to rotate into this. But GEX has a lot of sight lines back on different people rotating, but it's all focused right now back over towards TSM. Gustav trying to get the high ground, does connect with a couple of shots back over towards GEX, force him into a little bit more of defensive position. Apply a little bit of pressure off on the side angle to allow his teammates to get a different angle and maybe capitalize off of his movement.
The problem here for Gustav is that he is outside of the next circle, so one way or another, he's going to have to find a way down that hill and to group up with his teammates, or they're going to have to potentially reposition if they feel like they can't make this work. GEX going to have to play some defense if TSM wants to push this.
GEX just has to hold the line right now. They have to force all the pressure back over towards TSM. Michael's going for the peek on the side of this, but Shyway's not going to have the angle for it. This is aggression coming out from Rory. Just runs across, got the support of Gustav off on that high hill. You can see Shyway trying to prep up the grenade. It's going to throw off to one side, but it's not going to connect as Rory does manage to separate off to the side of this.
Rory taking some damage and gets aggressive anyway. I like the play. I like the confidence from Rory. Almost catches the member of GEX with a grenade in his hand. Now Chaiwei's cooking another one. Will that find TSM? No, that one is just off the mark. Rory, now Gustav has finally made his way in on the buggy for the support.
This is a peak battle back and forth. It's all about angles and controlling them right now. So slowly and steadily, TSM is forcing GEX back to be more contained, and sooner or later they're going to find the angle for it. See, Michael is still caught outside the blue right now, so Rory's also caught up on it, now starting to make their push on this. Gustav is going to walk right up next to GEX. The spray's going to come through. Nice shots coming down that, and that's going to buy them a little bit more space to work with.
That is a big win there for TSM in this fight. They needed to get Chaiwei down to create space for themselves to get inside of here. Unfortunately for them, the circle has shifted way to the east, Matchup.
You see all of those teams in rotation running right down next to where 4 AM is at. There's so many teams stacked up in this little funnel spot, and it's just like whack-a-mole right now. Everybody's just looking at so many different vehicles. There's too many options, so it's very hard to shoot anybody directly out of this, but it looks like Jefflock is taking a lot of damage. Vehicle explosions starting to come out.
A lot of damage being done. Rang finds T1. He's going to pick up some kills for Entis Ace here. They've got 2, but they lost a member in transition. 4 AM doing a lot of damage. Forever did get knocked, but I believe they're going to be able to get the res onto him.
Ace only has this shack, but they've got so much cover from all the cars that are right next to it that are just demolished that they can actually play with it.
It's a demolition derby over there as they have got themselves a shack for now. Let's see if they can make that work. It is a precarious position to be in any time that you've got 3 members of your team in one of those shacks. Meanwhile, Genesis has to make their way through San Martin with VC in here in front of them.
And this is where that information gathering becomes so important from those earlier rounds. Trying to figure out how do we creep through these buildings so that way we can kind of side skirt some of these fights. It's so nerve-wracking as you're making the push through these different angles. You have to assume that there could be somebody on any angle. Look, Summer is just waiting for somebody to walk forward, is going to spud up Profi. Doesn't have the shots to connect, so doesn't give away his position. So with this, we might see a couple of these guys kind of leapfrog each other, and it's just about information getting fed back over as Profi's finding himself in a very dangerous spot, caught up between 3 different members, but it's going to be Tide that goes down off the push from Profi.
Wow, Profi with a nice play there to get Tide. Tide had been fed the information from Summer. He knew full well Profi was coming.
He's to your left, K-Mine. He's to your left. Shots coming out from Dome, who's going to take him down, and this is turning into a disaster for both teams. It's just so many different peak angles, and nobody can figure out exactly where the shots are coming from.
All right, K-Mine is still knocked. Summer is trying to find Nerf. Profi on the left there. Profi gets a little bit of damage into Summer as he crosses, isn't able to find that next shot. A nice try on that pre-fire by Profi, just a second too late. Now Silden has gotten in on this. He's gonna get the knock, but it's going to be Domu who gets the finish.
It's so messy whenever you're playing around all these different angles right now. Domu is just kind of creeping through everything that's going on with the remnants of Genesis and all the crates around them. Na'Vi is still getting caught up into a little bit of a skirmish off the top of this with Genji. Looks like they've started to have to surrender some of their control, now firmly regrouping back up together, but there's a lot of teams that are starting to push into that northern area, instead opting for good sight lines, more controlled locations.
Yeah, this hill that Lazarus has been controlling is a very valued location. You can see why. There's 3 teams up here. Genji is on the other side of this as well. TSM is pushing up. They have found Wu Feng. That is going to be an easy flush here for Gustav. TSM on the push. There's only 2 left. They are taking a bunch of damage. They are very battered.
We still have the fight that's going on with VC and W-Click back down towards the south. Everybody's just trying to separate away from San Martin, but it is so dangerous off this. You can see W-Click still looking back down towards VC, and it's going to be Rory going down to the blue and going down in 13th place as TSM is eliminated.
Yeah, TSM just had so much damage done to them in their battles throughout that match. They will go down. Now VC is in the blue themselves, trying to find some way to potentially get up to the back of this hill, but W-Click is up there, and Na'Vi is fighting with QM right now.
Making the push right up on top of this. You can see QM has 2 members that already have lost 1. Another is down, just throwing out the blind grenades. It's gonna be easy, slowly creeping up onto this. Are we gonna see an angle back over Pokemaladoy as it's getting very, very hazardous. 1 solid grenade could land on top of QM and just destroy them, and it's gonna be exactly what happens.
That was a great grenade from Pokemaladoy. It finds the crevice that QM was stuck in. Those are really dangerous positions to be in on sometimes this map. Entis Ace making a run. Tempo Storm is right there to put a bunch of damage in them. That vehicle is on fire. Somehow Rang is able to get up there and get in that shack.
You see him slam on the brakes at the end of that. Had to be so cautious not to hit it going full speed. Doesn't want to take any extra damage. Somehow Ace managed to survive through it, and it's going to be W-Click that actually comes up on the top of that fight over with VC.
Well, that's what happens when you're in these cities. You take the location that is closest to the center. If you are forced into a city, the optimal position to be is at the edge of the city because you are the ones who get to gatekeep, play that defensive position, and then you also have the information on what's going on outside of the city.
So 4AM is trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to leapfrog these teams to make it back in the next safe zone? They're going to opt into playing next to the wreckage of all those vehicles we saw beforehand. Cut a path on the side of this. There are going to be two teams that get sight lines down in the low ground, and then Navi is going to have a sight line up towards the north. They've got to be very careful on this rotation. They're going to run right into a trap. A lot of shots starting to come through. Somehow 4AM is managing to survive through this.
Wow, Xiao Lu able to turn on a dime there and avoid Navi. He saw them right away now. Gen G trying to get on the action as well. They have found Forever and the other members of 4AM. A grenade is coming through, but two members of 4AM are down.
Wayless is about half life right now, just trying to survive. The grenade's going to come out. Big battle back and forth. Wayless is somehow dodging these shots and is trying to get up into this. But now it's just one member of 4AM trying to fight back Navi, but instead it's going to be Gen G that takes him down.
Gen G's Taemin puts the nail in the coffin of 4AM. Now it is Fuzzface and the members of FaZe who are coming up on the back of this, trying to third party. They find Esther.
How do we see these reses trying to come through? I was going to say that is so brazen. Got Fuzzface, takes a couple of shots back over towards him. A lot of control really coming back over towards FaZe now as they have so much control in the north. Navi just runs right up into the middle of Gen G. They're just done with it. They're like, we don't even want to deal with you anymore.
Somehow Pio is able to survive and get behind this truck, but he is basically dead to rights. Fuzzface has stepped up over the hill and is now putting shots into Navi. They have one knock. They're going for the res. The other members are pushing up, trying to buy some time. Pio is done. Bestalach finishes Gen G off.
You know Fuzzface was up there. That grenade could be big, though. I can't believe what we're watching off of this. Now Navi has to get the res back. And again, I was going to say, FaZe was just watching that guy be like, what the hell is going on? But now that's just turning into sheer chaos over there.
Look at how much of this circle FaZe controls. They control the entire ridge line west of water treatment. You've got Fuzz on the back. This is looking very good for FaZe right now.
So now we have Lazarus caught up in a little bit of a skirmish. W-Click grenade's going to go through off of this. Still 4 members up for Lazarus. Now just 1 on W-Click. But both of these teams need to make their way towards a safe zone. And while it's not going to be too safe, there's not a lot of cover to be had. So now we do see Lazarus capable of making that push. But where do they go?
Well, they've got a lot of room to work with inside of the circle. The bad news is it's pretty flat and there isn't a ton of cover available, and the circle is pushing them in towards Tempo Storm and the surviving member of Entis Ace, Rang, who has gone from shack to shack here and has found himself some placement points at least.
It's going to be about hay bales coming through this. Shots coming out from Forrest. Going to go ahead and finish off Rumblers there. Still being fairly contained back over towards the east. It looks like that's going to be the approach point that FaZe is going to try to go for. And you can now see Lazarus is throwing out smokes, but there's just nowhere to go. We do have FaZe that has a sight line back over towards it. How much utility does Lazarus have? Can they even get close enough to actually start taking shots towards anything? They've got, how many, what, that's about 6, 7 smokes down right now? How much more utility do they have left?
I was going to say they have a bit of a lift to work with, but then Uva and the members of Fuzzface have the angle on the southern side of this to put a ton of pressure on them. You can see Uba is just spraying in there, hoping to get some damage. He sees Entis Force up in that crevasse as well.
So Lazarus does manage to cut a little bit of a path into this dip, just narrowly avoiding the shots coming out from FaZe. FaZe taking shots back over Force just narrowly, but again, going to get drawn attention back over. Navi's going to run up, get the down and the flush onto Fuzzface right back behind this.
Oh, Poka is having one heck of a round for himself. Good job there. That's going to make FaZe's containment a lot more difficult to maintain. Entis Force still working with this little divot they have. Goya's throwing up some grenades, but some grenades from Lazarus are coming up and over. Looks like he's able to dodge them. That grenade just a bit too far.
Got to be so cautious. Everybody from Lazarus is down inside that dip, and you can see Force looking back. They know exactly where they are, have to be so cautious on it. Meanwhile, Tempo Storm starting to separate out. They have control over the center compound and trying to make sure that they hold it. Meanwhile, Doya looking back on this angle, see the shots coming back between Lazarus and FaZe, trying to prep it up. He knows exactly which bush that they're hiding in, takes the shots on top of it, and look, that's actually going to be Luke that gets it down onto Purdy Curdy. That's some friendly fire coming through while we have FaZe off on another angle.
Oh, Kale's down to 1 hit point. He has to heal here. Doya is pretty much dead to rights, but Purdy Curdy is going to get finished off. So a couple points picked up. FaZe Clan with 7 kills for themselves, continuing this spread along the eastern ridge.
But they still have Navi back behind them that's terrorizing. It's drawing attention away. You can see FaZe is kind of split between fights right now. They know that they have Navi on one angle they have to be cautious of. Meanwhile, there's a fight that's happening with Force and Lazarus that they have to be very cautious about. And this is just kind of handing over complete control of the center towards Tempo Storm. They hear all these fights, but they don't have sightlines on them.
Yeah, this is a really challenging position for Tempo Storm in a way. Yes, they have a great position in the center of the circle. It is very favorable to them, but they're not getting a lot of kills. But this time, Sharpshot gets up on the roof. This is a heady play to pick up a kill point.
This is also so brave at this point. Standing up, everybody can see that angle and instead going, no, I'm going to get as many kills as I can out of this position and taking the shots. It's because everybody's caught up in all these fights on the edge, and that's allowing Tempo Storm just to wreak havoc back on these other side angles.
Man, Kale is a one-man wrecking crew over there for Lazarus. He gets the knock on to Luke, but is he going to get the finish? Because Uba seems to have some kind of angle. There we go. Finally, Uba is going to steal that kill.
Making their way up to 9 kills right now. Kale is just kind of caught off on this dip. Alo, I believe, the last member for his squad. So 2 solos out, just hiding off next to FaZe. On the other side of that, they still have Pokemaladoy that's alive, caught up in his shack, losing all of his tires, and nowhere really that he can go as he tries to step around in that smoke. And look, everybody is just raining down death upon him. Hops on the motorcycle, trying to get some airtime, and he's going to be shot out of the air.
Great stuff here from Tempo. They did find Kale as well. Zampa's gonna get him, finish off OG and Enta's Force. Now FaZe making their way along this ridge once again, trying to find some way to break this compound that Tempo Storm has.
They do have an aggressive angle. It's gonna be right up next to the side of this. And have to be very cautious. You can see Uba's just trying to draw a lot of attention. Sharky's caught up, trying to peek battle with him right now, and that's kind of allowing AT to sneak up right next to this. He is gonna get in grenade range, throw it back over there. How good is the cook? It's gonna bounce off to one side, does not connect, but look, Tempo Storm instantly reacts to that, steps back out and realizes we have got to control the low ground.
That is such a well-timed grenade. He cooked that perfectly, bounced up and over, and almost gets the knock onto Tempo Storm.
So with this, Lazarus' Halo kind of managed to creep inside the safe zone as we have this fight that's happening between Tempo Storm and FaZe for aggression, trying to fight over control of this complex, and it feels like FaZe goes, okay, let's step back, look back along this edge, see if we can find any weak points, any vulnerabilities in how Tempo Storm has this set up.
FaZe still has a chance here. They just need to get a couple knocks. You know, that grenade almost got things kicked off for them, but it was just short of getting it started. And now Tempo Storm moving back up on top of those roofs. Maluk's got that 2-story, and there is still some ground to work with for FaZe behind this ridge.
Zampa's repositioning a vehicle right now. Alo's just right now looking at this, the nice texture that is on this hay bale, not in any position to really make any moves, but he could end up taking some shots back over towards Tempo Storm. All their angles up on top of this buildings are really just designed to protect them from FaZe's position. So if Alo does step up, he could get some shots back over towards where we see Tempo Storm holding this position and take down a very vulnerable spot and open up the doors for FaZe. Meanwhile, Tempo Storm has to be very, very cautious of this low ground approach. You can see AT really wants to step up into this as now we're starting to move back over towards this complex being in the center of the next circle.
I mean, the real question for me is how much utility does Tempo Storm have left? There goes Alo getting found out by Sharky. They go down in 3rd place. So another decent finish here for Lazarus, but it is a 4v3 now. Uba and the members of FaZe Clan stepping up, seeing if they can just catch somebody peeking, get that initial knock, and maybe find some way to push up over. Here come the grenades from Tempo Storm.
And these were 2 teams down towards the bottom of the leaderboard. Both of these teams need to have a big game right now. Meanwhile, Tempo Storm still holding those high ground peak points, where I gotta say, FaZe knows exactly where every single one of them are, and it becomes so much more hazardous when you keep peeking from the same spots. It's really easy to start lining up that headshot and just go for the tap peek back over towards it, but Sharpshot still playing it quite well. That's why he's constantly bouncing around different points behind this roof.
Well, we've only got about 20 more seconds until this circle is done, and we get our final one, which will center up here. Mexi trying another grenade. This one bounces short of the roof. Let's see if he can potentially get another one. No, he's looking to get some smokes, as now FaZe realizing that they're going to have to start pushing. They're going to have to set up this smoke wall to make their way in past the defensive front of Tempo Storm.
Now it's all about the angles. Can FaZe get the down that they so desperately need to get so that way they can continue this push back over towards it? Will Tempo Storm find the angle? Narrowly jumps away from the grenade. Sharpshot takes a lot of damage off of that. AT's starting to be able to get a little bit more aggressive with that reposition. Now starting to creep up onto it. I'm not certain if Maluk and the rest of the boys know that he's managed to get this close to them. starting to make his way inside that building complex. Finally gets the sidelines back over towards him. Shots are going to come out from AT. He's going to have to retreat back off of this.
A bunch of damage done, and they are just pushing in. Maluk and the others are backing up. AT takes some damage, but he's going to find Maluk there and get the first knock and kill in this battle. AT's going to heal up, and now he's looking for Zampa in the back.
So now we've turned this into a 3v3. Numbers are up and even. Sharp Shot holding the inside line right now, just waiting to see if anybody's going to push up for it. Meanwhile, Sharky's looking back where the center point could be. FaZe is trying to figure out where did the repositions come from, and it looks like Zampa might be going a little bit playing an outside point on this, trying to flank around. Does get a couple of shots out, so that's going to give away his position. Now it's all about the cat and mouse game as everybody's going to be peeking back and forth. Sharky trying to use the motorcycle to get a little bit more cover.
That was such a quick reaction by Zampa there with that MK14. Really nice stuff with that semi-auto sniper. Now he's going to push up onto this left-hand flank, try to back up Sharp Shot as this circle will continue to close. It takes about a minute, so there's a little bit of time. Uba is now made in the house, but Mexi gets found out by Sharky and takes a bunch of damage. The flush hasn't come through. Uba seeing if he can protect him. No, he takes some damage himself.
Realize it's a little bit too hot, just trying to get back away from this. Shots are going to come back over towards it, and now you can see Tempo Storm starting to get a little bit more control over this. Trying to figure out exactly where AT is. They do manage to spot him out, and that's going to be Tempo